Hello and welcome to Business Law 160. Today we are going to go over Chapter 20, which focuses on performance. As you can see, there's a child right next to me. This is my firstborn son, my precious pearl, the heir of all I possess. I have mentioned him to you many times, and this is what happens when you work from home. You have kids, and so he wanted to come and say hello. Christopher?
Hello.
And he's going to be sitting down. Now, don't judge, but it is after 11 p.m. I can't get him to go to sleep. He's going to sit down, he's going to be very respectful, he's going to watch, and he's going to learn a little bit about performance when it comes to contracts. So, this is actually, again, a lot of easy concepts, and a lot of these things, they probably will make sense to you. A lot of it is common sense, but the Chapter 20 focuses on specifics of it. So, talking about performance. What exactly is performance? It's what it means when you perform your end of the contract. So, two people enter into a contract. What happens? There has to be an action that's taken place. So, if you are entering into a contract with somebody where you're going to manufacture 100 toy trains, and the person, after you manufacture it, somebody's going to purchase it from you. Well, you have completed your performance once you have finished producing those, manufacture them. The other side finishes their performance by actually paying you the money that they said they were going to pay once they receive those items. So performance essentially is doing what you're supposed to do, carrying out your obligations. And the basic obligation of a seller, the seller's basic obligation, is to transfer and deliver the goods. I'm going to say that again because that I usually test on. Back in the day, that's what I would have tested on if this was normal stuff. But the basic obligation of the seller for goods is to transfer and deliver those goods. And the obligation of the buyer, the person who's buying the items, is what? Is to simply pay for those goods. And when you're entering into a contract with one another and performance is being looked at, you do not want to impair the other person's obligation from carrying out their duties. So you enter into a contract with somebody. They're supposed to manufacture those toy trains. Well, you can't impede their performance. You can't stop them performing. You cannot put roadblocks that are going to prevent them from carrying out their end of the contract and then say, oh, wait, well, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. No, if you're stopping them, if you're putting in those roadblocks, if you're making it more difficult, then you're becoming an impediment and you are preventing them from performing, but the burden is going to be on you. Performance by the seller. How else can we see what the seller is doing? We look at tender of delivery. And what does that again mean? It's A and B enter into a contract with one another. And once the person who's manufacturing the goods or makes them, he or she lets them know that they're ready to be picked up, then they're ready to be picked up. So the tender of the delivery is part of that performance. You are letting the other side know that they have to pick up the items, that they're ready to be picked up. That's part of the tender, that's part of the delivery. So you have the goods and you're conforming to your contract by letting the other side know that they are ready to be picked up. You always have to give a reasonable time and place. So whenever I talk about tender of delivery, it could be either the place of the delivery or the time. If I tell you, okay, I finished the stuff that you wanted me to order, and I'm telling you now you can come pick it up at 2:30 in the morning. Well, is that a reasonable period of time for you to come and pick up your order? No, it is not reasonable. If I tell you to meet me in an alleyway to pick up your stuff, if this is normal legal stuff, then no, me telling you to meet me in an alleyway in the middle of the night is not the normal course of procedure. Usually what happens is you're picking up items or getting them delivered between normal business hours, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Now, there can be deviant from that as long as both sides agree, but it cannot be unduly an undue hardship on the other side, because then again you are impeding them from performing their side. So that takes care of the time and tender and the place of tender. Again, a lot of it has to do with specific items that we're discussing, maybe the particular area of expertise, whether it's um, if it's like toy trains or toys, it's going to be treated differently than if you are having somebody deliver a DJ equipment to a club, right? So then you might want that DJ person who's setting up that equipment to come in at midnight, at 1 o'clock in the morning, when the place is actually very busy, so we can test out the equipment to see whether or not it works. So it depends on the type of performance, the type of contract, and the industry to make sure that it is a place that makes sense. Christopher, go to bed. Go to bed. So that is place of tender and time of tender. Now, there's something called the perfect tender rule. This is something I want you to know. This is something you should be writing down right now. The perfect tender rule is as follows. It imposes on the seller the obligation that the items that are being ordered must be exactly what's being ordered. So if you order something and it's not exactly what you ordered, you have 3 options. You can reject the whole, you can accept the whole, or you can reject some and accept some. How can I explain this? Well, very simple. You are probably ordering a lot from Amazon now, and if you're not ordering from now, you probably ordered from Amazon before, right? So let's say you have a party coming up and you order 100 family t-shirts because you're having some kind of big party or a big family reunion, and you're ordering these 100 blue t-shirts with white writing on them that say family reunion. 100 shirts, blue with white writing. Now, if you actually get red t-shirts with white writing, it is not what you ordered, but what are your options? Your options are you can reject the entire thing, and it is within your right to do so. You can say, you know what, the red looks good, I'll just keep the entire thing and then pay. Or you could say, you know what, the red doesn't look too bad, I'm going to keep 50 of those, and I still want my order of blue shirts. And you're going to call the company that you ordered from, and you're going to ask them to make good. Now, you have to give them a reasonable period of time to make good on that particular product that you just purchased. Or you can just reject the whole thing. So you're both coming up with a time frame for them to remedy the situation. But let's say time was of the essence and you won't be able to do that, then you just reject it, you get your money. But sometimes money's not good enough. If your party's coming up next week and you really need those shirts, well, what are you going to do? Maybe you're going to have to accept the red shirts in their entirety and still ask for a refund, especially if these were specifically made for, let's say, the Bekhit family or the Moses family or whatever the family is. Those are not t-shirts that the company is going to be able to resell, but you might be able to get a portion of your money back. Now, you can't use the perfect tender rule and apply rejecting the whole, accepting the whole, or partial if, let's say, it's food items that you ordered. Let's say you ordered, and this is the example I always use because I love sponge cakes. So let's say you ordered 100 sponge cakes, and they're individually wrapped, they're moist, they're delicious, and you get your 100 sponge cakes, you open the first one, you eat it, and you say, you know what, there's something not right about this one. You eat another one. You eat another and another. And now you've eaten 90 sponge cakes, and there's only 10 left. Now, can you call Amazon or can you call whichever company and say, you know what, I ordered 100 sponge cakes from you, but there's something wrong. I want to return them. Well, you ate 90 of them. What are you returning exactly? And why did it take you 90 sponge cakes to realize that they're not good? So again, it depends on the industry, it depends on what's being ordered, it depends on the situation and the circumstances, right? So that's the perfect tender rule. Cure by the, then the, actually at the cure by the seller part. It's like if you go to a restaurant and you order a meal. You have a couple of bites, there's something not right with it. Well, a lot of times you can send that meal back and you get another one in its place. But if you've eaten like the entire thing and then you're going to complain about it, what do you expect to be done? Are they going to give you a whole new meal? Are they going to refund you the whole thing? But you ate it, right? So use common sense, which you have been in the past, right, in just living life. So that's cured by the seller. You're giving the seller an opportunity to remedy the situation, but you also are using common sense here. You also have a finite period of time to inspect the item to make sure that it's okay. Let's go back to the sponge cakes, and then we'll also do the same analysis with the t-shirts. You ordered the sponge cakes, and they actually were delivered on April 1st, 2020. So they were delivered April 1st, 2020. You don't look at them until a month later. You realize that they expired on April 3rd, 2020. Now, you still received them, they were in good time. But by the time you looked at it, a month or 2 months later, they've certainly expired. Are you going to be able to return it? I don't know. What about those t-shirts that you ordered and you got the wrong item? Are you going to be able to return it 3 months out, 4 months out? Probably not, because that window of opportunity for you to inspect and notify the manufacturer, the seller, has gone by too long. Now, where have you seen this in just regular everyday practice? Whenever you buy something, on your receipt, it tells you that you have a particular period of time to return it. You may have 30 days to return an item, you may have 14 days to return an item, you may have 60 days, depending on what it is. You have a finite period of time to inspect the goods and decide as to whether or not you're going to keep them or you're going to reject them. So just kind of make sure that you keep that in mind. And when you're rejecting an item, there's got to be a reason for it. What if the reason is I simply changed my mind? Well, if you're within that time frame of that first 30 days or whatever, there's probably not going to be a problem with you returning it unless it is a food item. It might be just that it's a health hazard to do so. But you also want to make sure that it's not an item that was specifically manufactured for you, or it's not going to be able to be sold to anybody else. Once you accept it, you can't renege on that. So there's no backseas. Once you decide that, hey, I accept this item, it's good to go, you cannot say, change your mind maybe a month or two later and say, no, I changed my mind, I don't want to do it. So those are the acceptance, rejections, revocations, place, and all that good stuff. Let me see here. What else do I want you to know? Again, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. What is your obligation as the buyer? It's simply to pay. So you have an obligation of payment. Once you get your item, you have to pay. Both parties have an obligation, right? It's something like I manufacture, I possibly have a right to also insure these items to make sure that you get it. You have an obligation to simply just pay for it. Insurance, I'm not going to get into that, don't worry about it, but insurance, the person who's sending the item, the manufacturer, generally speaking, has the burden of insuring it. How do they know? And tracking it, how do they know you actually got it? How do they know that somebody didn't just steal it? Well, they insure it, and then the insurance provider now kind of carries that cost, shares in that cost. Okay, non-happening of a presupposed condition. Well, that clause excuses the duty of performance if an unforeseen supervening event happens. So, if something didn't happen that was supposed to happen, that was a necessity for the contract, well, then it excuses the performance on both parts, meaning both sides kind of get a freebie, a way out, because something happened beyond their control. It's kind of similar, but not so much. Look at what's happening today. Today, everything is kind of at a standstill, right? So the coronavirus has stopped a lot of industries from actually doing what they were supposed to do. contractors, professors, lawyers, restaurants, landlords. Almost every facet of life has been changed. Why? There was something that happened that was beyond anyone's control. And so it would be very hard to enforce any type of contract, because when something happens beyond your control, it's going to be very difficult to do that. Also, right to cooperation. Like I said before, you have to cooperate and do what's necessary in order for the performance aspect to actually happen. If not, then you're preventing the other side, the person you're contracting with, from doing what they need to do. Think back to what we spoke about in contracts, basic principle. You're entering into a contract with somebody because you want this relationship to happen. There's going to be a benefit for both sides. So you're not trying to screw the other side. You're trying to make something happen. However, if you anticipate that the other side is going to screw you, you know that they're not doing what they said they were going to do, you can actually now not do what you're supposed to do based on the theory of anticipatory repudiation, which means you know the other side is going to back out. You know they're not going to be able to perform their end of it, and so you're backing out of the contract because you know that they are, and so you don't want to waste any more time or anything like that. So that's anticipatory repudiation. I want you to know that. So no anticipatory repudiation. And the last thing I want you to know for this chapter is Hessler versus Crystal Lake Chrysler. Now, this is a case, it's an interesting case. It's about, again, contract dispute, right? What else? So, Chrysler introduced a vehicle called the Plymouth Prowler. And there was a problem with how many cars that they were going to be producing, right? So, this guy, his name is Donald Hessler, he knew that it was a promotional car, and he knew that maybe it was going to be produced, maybe it wasn't, but he put down a down payment on this car, right? He put down a deposit, and he put down $5,000, and he said to the Crystal Lake Chrysler Company, and he signed an agreement where they said if they get the cars, he would be the first person to get it. Well, the person who owned the dealership or whatever, after they entered into a contract with Hessler, they were able to get somebody else to pay more money for it. So they basically screwed him and said, no, we don't have it anymore. And he found out, and he realized that they did have it and that they screwed him. They denied the claims, of course, but the guy kind of followed up and found out that they did have the car, they were going to be access to it, but they refused to sell him the car. So he ended up suing, and he was awarded damages. Why? Because he put down a deposit, there was an agreement being made, they didn't fulfill their end of the contract. He knew that they weren't going to fulfill their end of the contract, and so he was able to sue, and he was able to. And that's really the only case I want you to know for this chapter. So that concludes chapter 20, and now, as I have been doing, I'm going to give you another question. Here you go. I'll give you actually a couple. I have them here on my phone. Okay, so I want you to know, I need you to give an example of the legal principle of satisfaction of a contracting party. What is satisfaction of a contracting party? Give an example of satisfaction of a contracting party. That's question 7 on your exam. So far you have listened to, this is the 7th question I'm giving you. Provide an example of the satisfaction of a contracting party. I'll give you another one. Give a detailed example of a court awarding punitive damages. If you want to give me a case that highlights that example, I'll take that as well. So you need to give me a case or a detailed example of the court awarding punitive damages. And I'm going to stop it right there, and I'll give you more questions in the next chapters.